Yes, indeed. We'll be talking about tracking COVID-19 and then take a look at drug security in the country. Let's head to Abuja. Mark.
Thank you, Chamberlain. As you've already seen in that introductory slide, we have with us Professor Mojisola Adeyeye, who is the Director General of NAFDAC, that's the National Agency for Food and Drug Administration and Control. You're welcome to Sunrise Daily, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's good to be here. Well,
I would like to start with what updates. I mean, how is NAFDAC involved in helping to control the disease? The disease that has taken all over the world, the coronavirus disease.
Well, it's an unfortunate situation we have in the world with this COVID-19. As a regulatory agency, we are out to ensure that the health of the nation is protected. Nigerians are protected. And about 2 or 3 weeks ago, I got a set of information from Bill Melinda Gates Foundation in terms of the latest about COVID-19. And this information included potential vaccines that are being used or that are being looked into, potential drugs and potential diagnostics. Understandably, that was sent to NAFDAC because that is what we are all about. Ensuring that the quality of medicines are there and also, or is there rather, and also that people have access to it. Among the drugs that are being looked into now are remdesivir, chloroquine.
Oh, so that is actually true because that's been going viral now.
Yes.
The talk about chloroquine.
Yes.
It's not proven yet, is it?
Actually, it was first, when you do research, you do in vitro, meaning in the lab. That news broke about 2.5 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And this was in China. But you cannot rely on in vitro test. But as of last week, another publication came out for clinical, on clinical research. There were about 100 patients in China from 6 different cities, including Wuhan, over 10 hospitals that were tested using chloroquine, or they were treated rather using chloroquine. And they found out that the chloroquine is superior to the control. In all tests, you have to have a control. But all this I knew about 3 weeks ago when I got this information, but until a clinical data come out, you cannot just rely on the in vitro or in-lab testing. So it's being used, to answer your question, at least for 100 patients it has been used and it has been documented to be effective over the placebo or over the control.
I see. So, well, you were still listing the drugs. I had to pick out the chloroquine one because we saw it. I mean, it's been making the rounds on social media and people have been wondering whether there was anything to it. We also saw only recently ex-INEC chair, Professor Maurice Iwu, saying that he also has a cure for COVID-19. I don't know if it's something you have taken him up on.
Actually, to make a statement about cure, you have to do a lot of clinical trials.
Okay.
And NAFDAC is supposed to be involved in any clinical trial, but we have not come across any protocol concerning this particular product that Professor Iwu is referring to. There may be potential there, but until we have clinical data, we cannot, I cannot make any comment about that.
So NAFDAC is not able to conduct the clinical trials. You have to wait for the people who claim they have the cure to conduct it first?
No, we review the protocol, all clinical protocols for finished products, for products that will be used in human beings, must pass through NAFDAC. So in a way, we are part of the clinical trial, but it is not like we are the ones conducting it. We are reviewing the clinical protocol that the investigator puts up. for us to review. But we have not seen anything yet from Professor Iwu.
So as a regulatory body, you are not directly involved in this COVID-19 fight. So for instance, you don't have any contact with the Lagos State government, or maybe with cases in well, there's no case in Plateau, thankfully.
Yeah.
We've been told that all of them tested negative. But you're not directly involved. You're more along the lines of, if there is a cure, we will check it out first before we let people know that this is okay.
Actually, yes and no. Yes, because we are not directly involved in the delivery of the treatment itself, but we are no, because we are involved. For example, in the US, if there is a shortage of medicines, I'm talking of critical shortage, the FDA comes out and actually orders the particular medicine. But this is an exception, it's not a rule. And what we are looking at right now is possibly getting a manufacturer to have a stock, to make a small stock of chloroquine. God forbid that things turn out of hand, we have to be prepared. Nigeria has to define itself, just like it defined itself during the Ebola crisis. And so that is part of what NAFDAC is working on as we speak. Of dialogue with the Minister of Health and DG of NCDC, and they are in favor of, let's keep something in stock just in case. We have to be very, very much at alert to make sure that we have medicine that we can use if somebody falls ill.
Okay. Only recently, you raised an alarm. You raised an alarm about how we are vulnerable, you know, in terms of our drug security to, you know, whatever happens in China. That alarm that you raised, some people will say, what was the purpose of the alarm? Because we were alarmed. Yes, we were alarmed, but it would seem that that's where it all stops, at alarm.
Actually, it's not just stopping there. I've raised this issue from day one since I joined NAFDAC. You know, before joining NAFDAC, I was working on HIV/AIDS drugs for children. And I started this actually in 1996. And then I got some kind of pushback. This was as a professor, you know, in the university in the US. And then about 2001, 2002, I started it again. I did not know the devastation of HIV/AIDS on Africans. At the peak of HIV/AIDS, about over 30 million Africans died. There is a documentary.
30 million Africans?
Yes. There is a documentary called Fire in the Blood. That documentary is an eye-opener, but I never knew the politics that were involved in HIV/AIDS at the onset. I was just doing my own university professor research type of thing. But realizing the devastation, I said, okay, let me start making drugs for children. After all, children are not at fault. Why shouldn't they have children? Drugs, rather. So that was what started my activism in the lab.
Well, what do you mean? Just sorry to interrupt you. I know you're trying to make the point about China and
yes,
our vulnerability to, you know, Chinese supply of drugs. But can you quickly make the point about the politics involved? Because for a number of other diseases, people have talked about the politics of pharmaceutical companies and how sometimes the cures are very simple, but because they have invested so much in research and a number of other things, they continue to make it complicated. Do you want to talk about a little about that?
Yeah, the politics doesn't have anything to do with COVID-19 now.
I know.
Just going back memory lane, there is what is called patent protection. If I discover a particular new molecule, I have 17 to 20 years to protect my new molecule. And that was what happened with HIV/AIDS drugs. Some of the drugs were under patent, but people were dying all over the world, especially Africa, India, and so on. And a lot of wars were going on in the courts because there was an embargo on HIV/AIDS medicines. that people should not develop it. And it was Mandela, Dr. Hamid of India, several fighters in the US, that why shouldn't people have access to HIV/AIDS drugs? These wars continued unknowing to me at that point, until there was a break. But by that time, over 30 million Africans died. There's a drug called diflucan. It's an antifungal medicine. And it was being sold for $40 per tablet in South Africa, something that cost pennies. That was the drug insecurity that drove me to what I started doing, developing drugs for children. And we have the same crisis now. The local manufacturers in Nigeria import everything except water, from starch to whatever,
That's our pharmaceutical company.
Yes, in Nigeria. Equipment, APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, they import everything. Now we are in a bind. We are in a bind because if China is ill, Nigeria is dead in terms of drug insecurity. The same, even India. India imports about 70% of their active pharmaceutical ingredients from China.
Even the United States.
Even the United States. But United States has something to fall back on. They can easily turn back their manufacturing gear. We don't have anything. Nigeria doesn't have anything.
So the purpose of your alarm, the alarm which you raised was?
The purpose is to wake up entrepreneurs in Nigeria to invest. We need to invest in manufacturing of APIs. We need to invest in the manufacturing of non-active ingredients that go with the drug to make the formulation. We need to wake up our universities to get more proactive in terms of research. TED Fund is supposed to facilitate research. We've got to. God forbid that this thing is prolonged. We're going to be in big trouble. We're going to be in big trouble. That is the alarm that I was sounding about drug insecurity.
So far, so good. Are any steps being taken? Because you did that press conference. We do not know what has happened after then.
Yeah.
What has the reaction been?
The reaction has been somber for the pharmaceutical industry locally. They know what they've been up against. But I've also gotten some vibes from one or two elder statesmen who said, okay, well, we can manufacture APIs, meaning active pharmaceutical ingredient. We can translate our research into products, because that is part of our problem. We do a lot of research in the university, but to translate it into usable product is a problem. And that takes a lot of money. That takes the country, the government, supporting research in the university, so that whatever we are doing in the lab can actually help mankind. That is where, the change can happen.
Let's swing this over to Lagos now. I'm sure my colleagues have questions for you. Gentlemen.
Right.
Well, right now, it's really dire, what Professor has mentioned. But I just want to ask you, how difficult is it to translate these research into products, just as you have said? We have had the president of Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria, and he has also raised the same alarm about the dearth of active pharmaceutical companies being able to produce anything. In the wake of this, COVID-19 that we are talking about now, among other things that could or that may happen now or in the future, how difficult or easy is it? What do we need to do to convert this research into products indeed?
That is a very good question. To convert research into product or research findings into products, we as a country has to put a premium on research. Again, I refer back to United States. I was there for over 30 years. There is what you call National Institute of Health. There is what you call National Science Foundation. We've got to invest in science in Nigeria. It is science that makes active pharmaceutical ingredients. It is science that makes non-active pharmaceutical ingredients. It is science that will do clinical trials. So we have to invest in science because our life depends on it. And to invest in science, it means that we have to even change our curriculum in the university. Because many times we just go with the first principles, but we don't think outside the box to think, okay, how can I do this so that this particular research finding can turn into product? But all this is driven by funding and by the realization. It's not just funding too, it is by passion. If you don't have passion on what you are doing, you can throw billions of money into it, but nothing is going to come out. But if we now know that we are facing a dangerous future of drug insecurity, then maybe the passion will come in.
Well, let me also ask you about this. You referenced the United States of America the other time, and they also crying just as you have raised the alarm that if anything should happen to China, America themselves would be in trouble because 90% of their own active ingredients are brought in from China. Now, how much of this for us as a nation in Nigeria, how much of this advocacy that you are championing has to do with government as opposed to the private sector? What is it that the government needs to put in place? Is it a political will or policies? What exactly does government need to do to encourage the private sector to do the needful?
The government has to invest in science. The government has to have a National Institute of Health, National Science Foundation. These two institutes in the US or entities are the ones that drive research. The government has to invest in the universities. And again, I try to be cautious when it comes to throwing money at a particular issue. We've got to develop the passion to take Nigeria to the next level, and I'm not being political now. We cannot continue to live this way and depend on other countries for everything, especially, I'm talking of medicines now. We've got to invest in science, and that is the first thing. The third fund is a good entity that can actually spearhead that. And I challenge my brother, the DG of TED Fund, let's think together about this. The National Science Foundation in the US is right into the middle of basic research, and they help from the secondary school to the university and post-university education in terms of support. So the government has to put in more into science.
Earlier on, when you said if China is ill, then Nigeria is dead. I mean, I'm sure that was an analogy from you. And I'd like to know, now that the COVID-19 is a big deal for China, in fact, it's affecting the whole world right now, economically and in terms of drugs, how much has this affected Nigeria's drug security so far? I think we'd like to know where we are right now. I understand that the situation is probably not that bad yet, but how much of a crisis are we in right now, if there is any?
Okay, we import about 70% of our medicines from India and China. Right now, we are not in a deep crisis, but we are in the sense that we cannot get anything that is manufactured from China as we speak. Therefore, a little bit of price increase may happen for medicines, because whatever a manufacturer has may have to be conserved. India, thank God that nothing is happening in India health-wise. We can still get some things in India. But God forbid that this crisis deepens. We're going to be in a big, big mess. But I pray that it doesn't happen that way. Thank you.
I know you talked about research, how we need to invest in that, but other than that, what is our low-hanging fruit? What can we actually manufacture in this country? How do we take it from there at the moment?
That is a good question. The low-hanging fruit is also our herbal medicines. Our herbal medicines is our low-hanging fruit. We have fantastic researchers in Nigeria that have done a lot of work on herbal medicines, but we have lost billions of naira because we don't protect what we discover in herbal medicines. And we don't put a lot of money, again, to translate it. That is one of the reasons why NAFDAC started the Herbal Medicine Product Committee. It's a national committee that is made up of herbalists and researchers. My goal is to bring the herbalists and the researchers together to build a level of trust between the two bodies so that whatever the herbalists cannot do, the researchers will do. And we need a lot of research in our herbal medicines in Nigeria because we assume sometimes because it is natural product from plants that is not toxic. It can actually be very toxic, especially on the liver. So this is part of what we are trying to do in NAFDAC. And the next stage is to bring patent attorneys, with NAFDAC being the go-between, so that whatever the herbalist relates to the researcher can be protected. Because we also have to learn to respect another person's intellectual property.
Now, it's very interesting that you say we're looking very strongly at herbal medicine. There are those who would have their ears standing and wondering, herbal medicine?
Yes.
But, you know, just quickly, because there are other people who will say that in the wake of Nigeria's closure of our borders as well, and the fact that they're trying to encourage local production here in Nigeria for a number of other things,
yes.
NAFDAC seems to be only interested in packaged products. Is there any way that NAFDAC is also increasing its, its surveillance on products that are not packaged? So, for instance, consuming chicken, for instance, that is sold in the market, people are wondering whether levels of antibiotics in products like that are being checked, and whether or not you're also concerned about products that are not packaged. Do you want to quickly respond to that?
Yes, that's a very good question. Part of NAFDAC's mandate is to do research, but that aspect of it has not been given enough attention for the past, many years rather. So in terms of unpackaged food, NAFDAC is going after that because part of our mandate is to also check the raw materials, which means if it is packaged gari, we have to check the gari before it's packaged. If it is any food, we have to check the components of the food. That is part of our own mandate. So we are already doing that. For example, using, what do you call it now, a chemical to make fufu to rice. We don't, literally you would think that NAFDAC doesn't, but now we are working on that.
What about palm oil?
Palm oil,
things like color in palm oil.
Exactly. That is another area. We are going after raw materials. We are going after unpackaged food. For oil, we check azo dyes in the lab because it is azo dye that they use to make it redder. So we do all this. But what will help us more is also to have enough staff.
Well, I wish we had more time, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sadly, we're totally out of time. We have to thank you.
Thank you so
for coming
much.
on Sunrise Daily this morning. Professor Mojisola Professor Mojisola Adeyeye is the Director General of NAFDAC. Thank you for coming on Sunrise Daily. The program continues shortly. Please stay with us.